This exercise for many of you may be your very first exposure and interaction with technical drawing. The purpose for creating and producing technical drawings is to graphically communicate to your client, to municipal and/or city agencies, and to contractors who are responsible for fabricating and/or constructing your project, the information that they need to complete this project. For this exercise, we need some very standard, simple, and basic tools and supplies to complete this work. One is our 18 by 24 inch drawing paper. It is recommended that this paper be of a paper weight of 50 pounds or greater. Very helpful to also have in your supplies and arsenal is this 11 by 17 inch gridded paper. The squares that are laid out on this gridded paper are typically 1/4 inch squares. And what this paper allows you to do is to, without needing to use any other tools, just simply this graph paper and a stylus, a pencil, a pen, to make the assumptions that each of these squares represents a certain length or distance, which allows you to sketch out quickly and space out objects that you may be contemplating for your design. Here we have the standard drafting tools that are used by all professionals in the design industry, be they architects, structural engineers, interior designers, civil designers, etc. The first thing that we have working is this drafting table, this small handy drafting table that has a parallel bar. There are a number of these small drafting tables available in Sequoia Hall SQ201 studio for your use. There are also large drafting tables in the same studio for your use. Provided you don't have a drafting table at your disposal, then you definitely need to have a T-square. It is your surrogate parallel bar, and all you need is an edge, a table, any surface that has a flat edge that you can slide the T-square up and down, and it serves the purpose for allowing you to draw horizontal lines continuously parallel to each other. Where we have our drafting table parallel bar and or our T-square to help us to draw repetitive parallel lines, we use our 30-60-90 triangles or 45-45-90 triangles butted up against our parallel bar or T-square that allow us to draw repetitive vertical lines. In order to create our drawing, we need our graphite pencils of various hardnesses, a pencil sharpener to keep our styluses sharp, an eraser to take back any markings that we wish to remove from our drawing, an eraser shield that helps us to screen off and isolate markings so that we can erase those markings without taking away any line work or markings that we wish to remain on the drawing. We need our architect scale to measure off at whatever scale we are drawing the linear dimensional elements that we wish to create. We want to have an 18-inch or 24-inch straight edge that allow us to draw linear elements that may not be 30, 60, 90, or 45-degree angles or horizontal or vertical. One last very important supply that we need to have on hand is either masking tape or drafting dots to tape our work down. We do not want our drawing surface, our drawing paper, to move or rotate while we are in the drafting process. It is highly recommended that you visit Sequoia Hall SQ201 to become familiar with the space that you will be designing. In the foreground of this image, you see the drafting tables that are in this studio. The black horizontal elements on these drafting tables are the parallel bars that are mounted on these tables. At the back left of this room is a short canted wall with the entrance door to this room from the outer hallway. In the center of the image, you have the linear south wall that borders this between this room and the hallway, and on this wall are pinup boards. To the right hand side of the image, you see a portion of the east wall. Towards the top of the image, above the light fixtures, you see a 2-foot by 2-foot ceiling grid. And when you look through this grid, above it, that black area is the underside of the roof, the sloped roof of Sequoia Hall. This image displays or shows the west wall of Sequoia Hall SQ201. Again, in the foreground are the drafting tables that are in this studio. And mounted on the west wall are pinup boards, a whiteboard, and a corkboard. And again, above and through the ceiling grid, you can see the black underside of the sloped roof of Sequoia Hall. This image again is looking to the west. We see the sea green painted west wall. We are standing right up against the south wall, and we are looking so that we can actually see and understand the orientation of the canted wall where the entrance door is located. This image is a close-up image of the canted wall. Note that the intersection of the canted wall and the west wall is a very sharp corner, yet the intersection of the canted wall and the south wall is more of a curved element. That is how it was finished, which would make it difficult in the room to actually measure and understand where actually is the intersection of those two walls. This image provides us the solution to understanding, or at least justifying to ourselves, where exactly is that intersection of the canted wall and the south wall. And this is convenienced by the fact that this room has 12-inch square floor tiles. So if we count from the canted wall to south wall intersection and count to the left and project up towards where the sea green west wall connects to the canted wall, we go 3 squares out. And if we count from where our text is that says 12-inch square floor tiles and count the tiles up to the corner, there are 9 tiles. So from a drawing standpoint, we can rationalize and justify that this canted wall cants at a direction of 3 squares towards the north and 9 squares, or 9 feet, to the west. This image is facing north at the north window wall. The windows, and if you view from the courtyard outside, these windows go from the bottom sill, which is basically equal with the top of the drafting tables that are in the foreground, all the way up to the roof, which again, at the top of the image, you can see the black underside of the roof through the ceiling grid. These three images are images you will wish to refer back to when you are drafting the plan view of the north wall and the elevation view of the north wall. The left-hand image is a close-up of the northwest corner condition. There is a 7-inch wide return wall face to where it meets the window opening. The center image depicts the 2.5-inch wide window mullions on the left and right that are separated by a 1-inch gap. When you look at the provided floor plan and you see the repeated 2.5-inch, 1-inch, 2.5-inch dimensions, this is the element that those dimensions are referring to. The right-hand image shows a 1-inch tall aluminum sill at the base of the glass in the window, and below that is a 4-inch tall wood ledger. Refer back to these images to refresh your memory and to what the leader notations are calling out when you view the provided elevations and plans. This is what happens when you take a break from your drafting process. Here we are showing SK5, one of the handouts provided in the assignment. SK, an industry standard for sketch. So this is sketch 5. In the upper left-hand corner, along the north window wall, the first dimension is a 7-inch dimension, which relates to the 7-inch return face wall that meets the window previously discussed. The next dimension is a 2.5-inch dimension, which is the left end of the window mullion. Moving to the right, you see 3 sets of repeated 2.5-inch, 1-inch, and 2.5-inch dimension strings, which again relate to the 2 mullions with the 1-inch gap previously discussed. And at the far right end is the last 2.5-inch mullion at the right end of the window. Note that the overall width dimension of the room from left to right along the north window wall is 35 feet 0 inches. Along the left edge of this floor plan, the east wall, and starting from the bottom left-hand corner or the southwest corner of SQ201, note that outside the wall perimeter is the first dimension of 3 3/4 inches. This annotation, the text portion of the dimension string, is placed in this location just for legibility and clarity purposes. Moving upwards along this wall, you see highlighted a series of repeated 2-inch dimensions that are on each side of the door openings and the small office window. Those 2-inch dimensions represent the width of the frame that surrounds each door opening and the small window opening. Note along this wall the overall dimension from the south wall to the north wall is 42 feet 0 inches. Beginning again from the southwest corner of SQ201 and moving from left to right along the south wall, note that the overall dimension from the southwest corner to where the south wall and the canted wall intersect is 26 feet 0 inches. And lastly, as we review this handout SK5, Starting from the upper right corner, where the north window wall meets the west wall, the overall length of the west wall from that northeast corner down to where the west wall intersects the canted wall, the overall length is 39 feet. Recall back to when we counted the tiles on the floor in the image above. We discovered that the canted wall moves towards the north 3 feet. The east wall is 42 feet long. Therefore, 42 feet minus 3 feet equals the 39-foot 0-inch length of the west wall. We'll review how to connect and justify the linear expression of the canted wall when we start drafting in a moment. As a point of reference, as noted before about using this graph paper and connecting that with the fact that our SQ201 studio room has 12-inch square tiles, let's take the two and merge them and assume that every one of these squares represents one of those tiles. So the first thing we always want and need to do, as mentioned earlier, is why we need tape, is you need to and want to tape down whatever your drawing paper is, in this instance, our graph paper, and you always want to align your paper, try and either square it parallel with the edges of your drawing surface, or in this case, I'm going to align one of these graph lines with the parallel bar. The parallel bar is pulled all the way down towards the bottom of this drawing table, and this is how you would want to do the standard even on the large drafting tables in the studio room. And then go ahead and tape down the corners of your paper, all 4 corners, not just 2. So I'm going to take my parallel bar, I'm going to slide it up and make sure that my paper is stretched out nice and smooth. And I pop that one up. And so the goal is to tape down your paper first so that it won't move and it's aligned with your drawing surface. So this should give a certain amount of comfort, especially to those of you who have never done any technical drawing of any form. So our room from the SK5 handout is 35 feet wide at its widest and 42 feet tall. As a basis, we're going to base and start drawing our room from the lower left hand or southwest corner of our room. And just for graphical purposes, to make sure this shows in this video, I'm going to use a very soft 6B pencil. So I'm going to go ahead and just make a little mark right here, a little dot that says that's where we're starting. And so now we need to draw a room that is 42 feet tall, 35 feet wide. Then we're going to come back down our 39 feet along the west wall. We'll draw 26 feet across the bottom, and where our 39-foot wall and our 26-foot wall end, we will just connect those straight across using our straight edge to close and clarify the canted wall. As noted earlier, the squares on this grid paper are 1/4 inch squares. So if we take our architect scale and orientate it so that we find the 1/4 inch scale side of our architect scale, and based on our previous exercises of learning how to use a scale, we place 0 at this little mark down in the lower left-hand corner of our room. And we can see that each of these whole foot marks pretty much line up with this graph paper. This wall length is along the east wall is 42 feet. So I should be able to come up here, find 42 feet on my scale, and I'm going to just make a little tick mark, just a little dot. You never want to draw against your architect's scale. One, it has a canted edge, so your stylus will either tend to want to climb it, or you just don't want to adulterate this thing. So this is where you need to switch tools. I'm going to bring my parallel bar up close to this dot, and actually since I'm right-handed, I'm going to flip my triangle over, and I'm going to come and first set my stylus on the point and then bring my triangle to my stylus. It is much more accurate than bringing the triangle thinking that and assuming I'm aligning where I want to draw this line, and then setting my stylus and then finding that the line's not where I'm expecting it to be. The other thing we want to always do is make sure that when we are drawing is that our stylus is relatively perpendicular to the surface of the drawing paper. If we tilt our stylus, then we're creating an angle, and again, that can cause the line that we're creating to not be where we want it. So I'm going to go and set my stylus here at the point at the top, and I'm just going to draw a line down and connect this point. And there's our first line. Calling again from our SK5, our room is 35 feet wide, in this case 35 squares at 1/4 inch. So I can rotate my scale around, and this becomes a game of moving your tools around. I can actually slide my parallel bar all the way up beyond where I'm drawing, bring my scale and my parallel bar down to meet this point, and then read across and find 35 feet, which are odd numbers on this scale, are not printed, but here it is between 34 and 36 feet, and I'm just going to make a dot so I know where my line is going to end. I can pull my scale away, bring my parallel bar down, set my stylus at the point I want to start, and then simply draw my next line. And there is our second line for this room. So our next wall, or this east wall line, which is vertical, so that tells us we need to use a combination of tools, our parallel bar and our triangle. So we could set our scale vertically this way and measure down to our 39-foot mark, or conversely, we could turn our scale this way and bring our triangle over. And again, I'm doing this more because it's convenient for me. I'm right-handed. So I can come over here, set my triangle to my parallel bar, and I can slide this over and align my scale with this mark up here. And I'm going to slide my scale down to where I find 39 feet, which is, again, an odd dimension, whole foot dimension, which is going to fall between 38 and 40 feet. There's the mark. And so I'm just going to come down here, and I'm going to make my dot down here at 0. And I can pull my scale away, slide my triangle over, set my stylus at my starting point at the dot, bring my triangle to my stylus, and pull the line. And I went a little long, which is just fine. You can always erase back. There's nothing that says every line and every corner needs to be absolutely 100% tight. When you're hand drawing, you're allowed a little bit of looseness. So the next line that we really would like to approach and draw is our south wall. And from the SK5 handout, that wall length to where it meets from the southwest corner to the canted wall is 26 feet. So again, I can take my scale, and just for convenience, I could turn my scale around. I could slide this up and set 0 at my mark and at this line, at the east wall line, and read across and find 26 feet and make a dot so I know where I'm going to stop. And I'm going to pull my parallel bar down. I'm going to set my stylus at my dot, bring my parallel bar tight to my stylus, and notice I'm actually using a pushing motion to draw as opposed to a pulling motion to draw. That actually allows me in a way to actually see where the point of my stylus is and where I am going to need to stop. And then our canted wall is simply to connect these 2 points, and this is where we need our straight edge. So we're going to come in here. I'm going to set my stylus at this point, and I'm going to use my eyes and align the other end and simply pull that line. And that is the interior profile of SQ201. As we noted previously in the SK5 handout, that the wall thickness noted on the west wall is 5 inches. Each of these squares is 1 foot, half would be 6 inches. Here's where you have a little bit of leeway in fudge factor due to, notice I have a perfectly sharp stylus. I've been using the one on the left. It's a little bit more blunted. My line gets a little bit thicker. So it is, for me, fair. I'm going to put a dot just to the side of halfway of each of these adjacent squares. Above the north wall, below the south wall, and then to the left and to the right of the east and west walls. And so now I'm going to come in here and I'm just going to simply pull these lines. Something's going to happen over here. We're going to have to figure out how to make that close up. And I'm going to line with this point and pull this line down. And I can slide my parallel bar up. And I'm going to move my bar above so I can see this side of the bar to draw my line against. And if you're confident, you can go and close little openings by hand. And so again, I'm going to set my stylus at my point. I'm going to pull down. So now I'm actually going to use my architect scale. And this, obviously this did not come up parallel. It happens. I'm going to use my architect scale. And from our learning how to use our scale, this far right end of our scale, the last bit is broken into, in this case, every one of those tick marks is 1 inch. So I can come in here, place my architect scale, place 0 at my line, and I'm going to come up towards this corner and I'm going to make a little dot at the 5 inch mark, and I'm going to do the same thing down at this end and make a dot at the 5 inch mark. And now I can just connect from here to here. And I don't like that, but we'll fix that later. So it's later, and now we're going to go and fix this line, and this is going to exemplify why when you're drafting you actually really want to be using one of your H pencils. A 2H or 3H or a 4H. A harder graphite is going to give you a much finer, especially when your stylus is sharp, and a much lighter line. I'm using, again, a 6B graphite, which is very soft, and I'm pressing hard to make sure that this is bold and it shows in this video. But I need to erase this line, and so I'm not so confident that I'm going to be able to pull that line fully back, that some of the graphite is going to be left in the paper. But how do I use my eraser and not damage either this line or this corner or this line that I want to keep? And the key is to mask it off. You can use a piece of paper, but I'm going to go ahead and use my straight edge, and I'm going to flip it over so that the metal is flush to the table. And I'm going to come in here and I'm going to mask off the line that I want to keep And I'm just going to come in here and do my best to erase this line back. And I'm not going to touch the corner. I don't want to come all the way to this corner because I don't have as much control. So that kind of erased back, not bad. And this is where your eraser shield is going to come in. So you have a little bit tighter control. So I can mask off the line this way, but I'm going to go ahead and use this little slot. And I'm going to cover the line at the corner and leave exposed the remainder of this little short line that I didn't want to challenge myself to get. And I'm just going to erase in that slot. And I'm going to get rid of most of the rest of that line. And so now I'm going to come back here and I'm going to bring this down and I can redraw my line. So the same thing would be for our door opening that's here. We have a door opening here and a door opening here. So there's line work that needs to be taken away. At our entrance door, noting from SK5, we have a dimension that goes from the inside corner to the door frame that is 3 feet 8, plus 2 inches for the frame, and then we have a 3 foot 6 or 42-inch door opening. So I'm going to move my parallel bar up out of the way. I'm going to find my 1/4 inch scale, and I'm going to rotate it around. 3 feet 8 plus 2 is 3 feet 10. So if I go and find 3 feet, the 3 foot mark on my scale is between 2 and 4. The 1/4 scale is larger than 1/8. I'm dealing with the larger fonts. So here's my 3 feet. So I'm going to go and set 3 feet at the corner. And I can come over here and I'm actually going to switch my pencil. And I'm going to go for one of my H pencils, and because I have a nice finer tip, and I'm going to come in here and find a mark at 10 inches. So I'm going to make a little mark there. And then our door opening is 3 feet 6. So I can go 1, 2, 3 feet 6 and use this tick mark, set it at this mark I just made. Here is the other side of my door opening. So I have a little mark here and a little mark here. So now to make sure that the lines that I draw across to create the insides of the door frame, I'm actually going to use my triangle. You can use other tools, but I'm going to use my eyeballs. I'm going to set the edge of my triangle as parallel to this line, this wall line that I have already drawn. And you want to get over the top. You want to be looking down at your work as well as drawing with your stylus perpendicular. So I'm going to come in here, set my stylus at that point. I'm going to bring my triangle to my stylus, adjust my triangle so that it is as parallel with that line, and I'm going to draw this little line here. And then I'm going to reverse this. And so this means you actually have to get up out of your chair and shift your body around. And I'm going to come over here and I'm going to set my stylus at this little point, make sure my triangle's aligned as parallel as possible with that wall line. So here's our door opening. So now we're faced with, since I chose to draw these lines continuous, I could have picked these dimensions and not drawn those lines. So there's no right or wrong about the order in which you proceed in how you draw. There's all different ways of approaching this, but I'm going to use my eraser shield again, and here's my little line, and I'm going to start with, let's use this one. Actually, let's see, what else we got to, this is better, so that way I'm not over that. So I'm going to come in here, I'm going to cover that, and I'm going to come in with my eraser, and I'm going to dig into this little slot. And again, my original line is that 6B dark pencil, so I'm not expecting to get all of that line back. That's just part of the game because of the graphite I chose and how hard I pressed in creating the line. So this is how and why you have an eraser shield. So now I'm going to go and erase the other side. And so there you go. That is how you go back and create this door opening, the door opening here that goes into this little office here, and the door opening that is up this wall that goes into the ID lab. Those are the standard steps and methodologies of how we draft and draw. We have our parallel bar, or if you don't have a drafting table, as long as you have a flat edge, you can still use your T-square against your triangles. So parallel bar and T-square, those are your horizontal line controls. Your triangle does your vertical lines. Your eraser shield and eraser help you take away things that either you've overdrawn, need to fix, remove from your drawing. Our technical drawing is really no deeper or harder than this. So hopefully drawing against this graph paper has given a certain amount of reality, comfort to the scale of a drawing and how to do it, the relationship of this grid paper to the scale on the architect scale, commonalities there. So let's go for a whole transition and change from this grid paper to our 18 by 24 inch paper. So we're going to untape this and get rid of our little tape here and move our tools. Bring our parallel bar down all the way down to the bottom. So recall that the goal is to always align our paper with our drawing surface. Now this little drawing board is just big enough to work with this 18 by 24 inch paper. So, and I know that I'm not going to be drawing to the top edge of the paper, so I'm going to go ahead and just take my paper and align it to the top edge of this drafting board, and I'm going to tape down this corner. And here's kind of what you really want to do is you actually want to kind of smooth this out, iron this out with your hand to make sure that your paper is flat and smooth. And I should have tucked this underneath the parallel bar from the get-go. So I'm going to pull my parallel bar up and I want to smooth this out and grab my little pieces of tape and make sure I tape down securely all four corners of my drawing paper. So that's how, if you use one of these small drafting boards in the studio or if you acquire one of your own, Dick Blick, then this is how you would use this board and tape your paper down and get it to fit to your drawing board. But we're going to go and do a complete shift. We're going to take this guy away and we're going to rely on just our T-square. So I'm going to take my paper and I'm going to align it with this left edge. And in this case, if you're drawing at home, whatever your desk, table, piece of board that you are drawing on. So I'm gonna align my drawing paper to that left edge there. And now I have to rip off my own little pieces of tape again. So I'm going to start here. And I want to make sure that I'm taping down and aligning this edge first before I worry about the opposite right-hand edge corners. So I'm going to tape this down. And this is where the little drafting dots are kind of convenient because they come on a little roll and a spool of tape. But from a budget standpoint, masking tape is much more affordable. And so there we go. That's how we would tape our paper down to a drawing surface, kitchen table, desk, any surface that has at least one nice flat straight edge that allows us to set our T-square to function as our parallel bar, and we're good and ready to go. Okay, so what we have here is the next handout attachment to the assignment that you want to be referencing. Note that the geometry of SQ201, there's 2 iterations of it on this drawing sheet. This is going on an 24-inch by 18-inch piece of paper. You are not required to articulate any of this title block information at this time. We're going to go over this drawing. There's a lot of notes on here. There's some dimensions that are currently highlighted across the top we're going to look at first. And then there's all of these little notes that kind of have little arrows pointing at stuff. Those are called leaders. So we have dimension strings and we have leaders, and then there is this paragraphical bit of text. And basically this text is going to be defining out, this is the optimal order if you proceed to do this assignment. This would be an optimal order to proceed. So it's kind of a checklist. So make sure you have this handy. So let's zoom in on these dimensions that are highlighted across the top of this page, because their purpose is to help you locate the corner of your drawing of the room SQ201 from the edges of the paper, so that all of our drawings, everybody's drawings, are virtually identical as far as the location of these room plans on the paper. Okay, so here we have zoomed in a little bit on the floor plan page, the SQ201 FP 1.0. The FP is standing for floor plan. The 1.0 means that it is the first sheet in any series of sheets that may be part of the floor plans that pertain to a space that you might design. So these dimensions that are highlighted across the top, note that there is a note over here on the side, and it's slightly cut off. It says that these dimensions are real world dimensions. So real world imperial inch units. So what this is really saying, now let's talk about dimension strings. We've visited them before, but coming from the point we're measuring, and in this case it's the inside corners of the SQ201 room, these, in this case, these vertical lines, or in this case this little horizontal line, those are called extension lines. They are extending from the location or the point that the dimension is referencing, and they extend up to the horizontal line of which the numerical text is aligned, is called the dimension line. At each end of the dimension line, where the extension line and the dimension lines intersect, is a small little slash, or what we call a tick mark. So this is the proper normal orientation and how all dimension strings should read. If you look throughout this document, the text for any individual dimension string is centered and either above or below the dimension line. So in this instance, to locate the northwest corner of SQ201, it is 1 3/4 inches from the left-hand edge of your paper and 1 1/8 inches down from the top of the paper. Now, just for numerical reference, SQ201, we already noted, is 35 feet wide at 1/4 inch scale. That equates to this number here, 8 3/4 inches. And we will visit how to use these dimension strings to figure out where is this northwest corner, northeast corner, and again northwest corner and northeast corner on the right hand floor plan of SQ201. You may be asking, why am I doing 2 floor plans that are identical? For those of you who design a space that are only going to use the existing floor area and not do a second floor, the right-hand plan would be your floor plan, where you would actually show any new walls, doors, windows, cabinetry, etc. The left-hand plan, where all this text happens to be hiding right now, you would use as your reflected ceiling plan, where you will notate or annotate the locations of light fixtures and other potential elements that may live up in the air, up on the ceiling. So that is the reasoning why you will actually be drawing 2 iterations of the SQ201 floor plan on this one drawing sheet. And again, these numerical values that are highlighted help you locate these upper left and right corners, northwest, northeast corners of the room on your paper. So we'll visit that again in a second. So now here there is a bit of text with a bunch of arrows pointing at stuff, and this text says these are the real, actual, factual dimensions of Sequoia Hall SQ201. So now here's this little paragraphical thing that we mentioned earlier. And this is just a hint. You don't have to follow these rules or recommendations, but it might be in your best interest to do so. So it says follow these steps. First, and what we've already done, tape your paper down to your work surface to keep it from shifting while you're drawing. The second step, mark the upper inside corner locations of the room based on the real-world one-to-one measurements noted along the top of the page. These are these highlighted bits of dimensions that we just talked about. Then, similar to what we did on our grid paper, draw the interior wall perimeter first in a light line. And again, use your H pencils, not your B pencils. Draw lightly, because if you need to erase something, it's easier to erase a light line than a hard line. And use a soft hand. Do not bury your stylus into your paper and create an indentation. That makes it difficult to erase lines back as well. Then the fourth step says, then draw the outer wall perimeter offset of 5 inches in a light line. Again, this is re-articulating what we just went over and exercised on our grid paper. And then it says to create the interior dimension strings, use a sharp, harder graphite pencil so that you can write legibly and see where you're placing these lines. So again, all of these dimension strings you want to articulate inside these floor plans, because they help you locate the door openings, the window, all of the mullion locations along the north window wall, etc. So you will have a lot of practice at writing in and creating all these dimension strings. And then it says, after that, go ahead and place the door openings at the 3 locations in the plan. And when we did the graph paper, we went through how to erase back the door opening using the eraser shield. So we're going to revisit all of that again. So now we are on the SQ201 as-built plan FP 1.0 handout page, and we're kind of zoomed into the lower left hand edge of the page. And again, there's a whole bunch of leaders pointing at stuff to identify what are the standard elements that appear on a typical drawing page, regardless of the discipline. Again, regardless of interior designer, architect, structural engineer, landscape designer, etc., etc. This is all just standard information, and we're here to learn. So, to the left of this 2 that is in a circle, there is a leader with some text. It says the text to this first dimension string So there's a little dimension string that goes from the southwest corner up to the first 2-inch dimension, which is the door frame. It says this first dimension from this corner of the room edge is set outside the room. So this little 3 3/4 inch text is living, it's not above the dimension string, it's living outside the room over here. But it's placed there for clarity and legibility. If that 3 3/4 was left over here, it would be conflicting with the 2. It's too close to the line work of the line for the walls. So it is set outside the room, directly straight, perpendicular from the dimension string itself. So that is an acceptable form of annotating a document and shifting things around as necessary. So then there's this note here in the center that says these are drawing titles, and it's pointing at this one over here that has a 1 in a circle and says floor plan 1, and it's pointing over here to 2 in a circle that says floor plan 2, and below where it says floor plan, it says the scale of this drawing is 1/4 of an inch equals 1 foot. So this is a standard drawing title. So the 2 or the 1 represents that all drawings, and it has to do with this little leader down to the lower left, all drawings on a page are numbered as a means of keeping the information organized. This numbering system allows you to cross-reference information across a drawing set. For example, this drawing is number 2 on sheet FP 1.0 and would be referenced on other pages as this little symbol here. And it's a circle, a horizontal line splitting in half. There is a 2 on the top saying, referencing it is drawing number 2, and below the 2 in the lower half it says FP 1.0, which is the title of this particular drawing sheet. And if you look over, if it was referencing this first drawing, it would have a 1 on top and say FP 1.0. Now, the leader and text that is to the lower left of this drawing title says, the scale indicates the drawing scale this particular drawing is drawn at. It is not uncommon to have multiple drawings drawn at different scales on the same page. It is just you're using your drawing page, your drawing area, to fit various pieces of information, and for legibility and clarity, the graphics in the geometry of the drawn objects sometimes need to be drawn at different scales. And then above that, to the above and to the right of where it says floor plan 2, it says this is the drawing name, and it describes the purpose and information communicated in this particular drawing above where this drawing title lives. And also note that up here there's another leader that says all 2-inch dimensions indicate the width of the door and window frames throughout the space. So over here to the left and right of the entrance door, there's a 2-inch dimension on each side. Same for the office door in the southwest corner, the door that goes into the ID lab halfway up the east wall, and as well as on each side of the little glass window that goes into that little office at the southwest corner. So now we are zoomed in on the lower right-hand corner of this FP 1.0 drawing sheet. Down in the lower right-hand corner, at the very bottom of the corner, is basically the sheet number. You could think of it as a page number of a book, but in this case it refers to the sheet number in a sheet set of drawings. And this is consistent, again, regardless of discipline. So the FP 1.0 says FP stands for floor plan, and again the 1.0 says this is the first sheet in a series of any FP floor plan sheets. Above this is the drawing name. The drawing name in this case says elevations, even though there are floor plans drawn on this page. But this sheet name articulates what is the information contained on this page. It could say details, it could say floor plans, it could say reflected ceiling plan, it can say elevations. The sheet name articulates to whoever turns the page and reads this bottom corner, they are cued into what is the information on the page. Above this is project information. So what is the initial inception date of the project? Who drew the project? And you put your initials there. You always want to make sure your initials are on drawing because you want credit for them, or you want blame when things go wrong. Below that is an area for a project number or some other accounting means of labeling or numbering what this project is as it relates to your business. And then below that, it's going to have an area for scale. And as mentioned, it is possible to have multiple drawings on a single drawing sheet that may be at different scales. Therefore, where it says scale, in this case it says as noted. If all the drawings on a particular page are the same scale, then you would plug in whatever that scale factor is, quarter-inch scale, half-inch scale, etc. Above this is a disclaimer, an ownership and copyright disclaimer that says, hey, this drawing is mine, you can't copy it or use it without my use or my permission, etc., etc. And then above this is there's these horizontal lines. It's just a little, kind of like a little grid. Sometimes we have to make changes or revisions to drawings. So this is where you actually document it's the first revision, second revision, etc., etc., the date of that revision, and then a small description of what that revision is about, what changed on the document. So all of this about this title block is information that tells any individual that turns the page and can read just this bottom right-hand corner and clearly understands what's going on this page. Above this is what is the project? Project name, its address, location, where do you find it, where do you go, where do you deliver merchandise, where does the contractor go to build this thing, etc. What is not shown here at the top of the title block is a business logo. Currently, there is a placeholder for CSUN interior design. You will be creating your own business logo and be putting your own business logo in the upper right-hand corner on your drawing sheets down the road. Again, all of this title block information is something that you are currently not required to deal with. This is for information only, but when it comes up in the future, it should ring a bell and shouldn't be foreign. So after reviewing all of that FP 1.0 handout information, it's time to draw, to re-articulate exactly what we already saw in our graph paper. So we had dimensions coming down from the top of the paper to locate the top inside corner of our room at 1 1/8 inches. And from the left corner, 1 3/4 inches, then 8 3/4 inches, another 1 3/4 inches, another 8 3/4 inches, and if everything is accurate, we should be left with 3 inches at this right-hand end. So there's no right or wrong order to do this. So I'm going to pick this methodology. And again, so you want to stand up and be over your work. And I'm going to set, and now I am using the real world inch side of my scale. You could go ahead and use your straight edge, same thing, it's the same animal. But I'm going to use my scale, and I don't have to make this little mark exactly where the 1 3/4 is. I'm going to take kind of an interesting approach here. So I'm going to come here and I'm going to set 0 at the top of my paper, and I'm going to make just a little dot at 1 1/8, and I'm going to make another dot somewhere over on towards this end of the paper at 1 1/8. And so I kind of know where that is. And I didn't really need that, and the reason would be is I have my T-square that is serves as my parallel bar. So, and I'm going to kind of take a different approach here. I'm going to be willing to erase a little bit of line work back. I've also switched to a slightly harder pencil. Again, it's still a 3B. It's still a soft lead, but I'm going to use a very light hand. And I'm going to just start, and actually, interestingly, I know I need to be 1 3/4 from the left edge and 3 inches from the right edge, so 24 minus 3 is 21, and I can start around 1 3/4, and I'm going to let it run over a little bit, and I'm just going to drag my pencil very light straight across, and I'm going to stop maybe just a little bit beyond the 21-inch mark. Theoretically, this line is part of the inside wall line along the north wall of SQ201. So now I have many different ways to go about this. I can pull my T-square up, and again, my paper is aligned with the edge of my drawing surface, which is at the end of my T-square, so I can trust this dimension. I can come in here and make a little mark at 1 3/4. If I do the math, what's 1 3/4 plus 8 3/4 across? But that's kind of not, my brain can't handle that right now. So I'm going to come and set my straight edge, set the 0 end at that little tick mark, and I'm going to come across and say, and I'm going to just make a little tick mark at 8 3/4. Theoretically, when I come back and measure with my architect scale by 35 feet, it should land right there. But I'm going to continue, and I'm going to say, now I'm going to go another 1 3/4 from that mark. Now, somehow I skipped my stylus. Now, which of my little dots is the correct one? It's the right one. And so I'm going to set my stylus here, and I'm going to go the other 1 3/4. So this becomes the other northwest interior corner of SQ201. And I can come again and shift my straight edge and measure another 8 3/4. And like I said, if this is all correct, I should be left with the 3 inches right at 21 inches at this end. And it's close, but that kind of gives me an idea. So now I'm at least saying, I know I'm going to be able to erase back these little overruns, and I'm going to erase out this middle section that is between the two floor plans. I'm okay with that. That works for me. So now, if we recall from drawing on our graph paper, we know that the east wall, this left-hand wall, was 42 feet in height. It's vertical, so we need to use our triangle, and we need to rotate our architect scale to show 1/4 inch scale. And so how do I want it? So I'm too close to the edge to flip my triangle. I'm right-handed. That would be really convenient, but it's a little precarious. Everything's kind of too close to the edge. So I'm going to have to be a little bit more creative, and I'm going to go this way. So I'm going to set my triangle. I'm going to set my architect scale, and I'm going to, so notice I'm really not touching my architect scale. I'm actually sliding my triangle, and I'm coming across till I meet that little mark. And I'm going to set 0 at this line, at that mark, and I'm going to come down and find 42 feet. And again, I'm going to turn my body because it's much more convenient, and something doesn't feel right. I moved something, but I didn't move the scale. So there's my 42 feet. So I know how far down my line needs to come. So I can pull my architect scale. Again, you don't want to draw against your architect scale because of that canted edge. You don't want to defile your scale, mark it up, all that kind of stuff. Vertical stylus, set it at this first point. Make sure that my triangle is tight to my stylus, and then just pull it down. So now I theoretically have a good portion of my north wall. I have my east wall. So now I'm going to measure my south wall, which is 26 feet. And again, you could go and do the 35 feet and come down to 39, come back and do the 26 feet. The order is not what's critical. It's just taking your time and being accurate. So I'm setting my 1/4 inch scale, 0 at this line that I drew, and it's against my parallel bar T-square. And I'm going to bring this down, and I'm going to come across, and I'm going to make a mark at 26 feet. And actually, I'm going to leave my stylus right there and bring my T-square down. And then I'm going to very light hand push my stylus back to this corner. So there's all different drawing techniques of how, when you hold your stylus, do you want to pick it up again? Do you want to put it back down? Do you want to risk not setting it down in the right place, etc.? So now same thing. I'm going to come all the way up at the top. I'm going to set my architect scale against my T-square. I'm going to set 0 at the northwest upper left corner. I'm going to come across and find 35 feet. Again, the 35 is not written on the scale. It's about how much information you can fit on the scale. And there's my 8 3/4 mark. Bingo, it's right there. So I'm not even going to pick my stylus up. I set my stylus down at the 35-foot mark, and I'm going to just kind of handy dandy flip that around and pull this down. So my T-square is nice and tight against the edge of my drawing table. I'm going to bring my triangle to, what didn't I do? I didn't measure from there, my 39 feet down. Ooh, got to be thinking sometimes when you're doing these things. So again, I'm right-handed. I'm going to set my triangle here. It's just more convenient because I'm right-handed. And I'm going to bring my triangle and bring this here. And I'm going to set my scale at the 39 feet. And you want to be looking straight down to make sure that that 39-foot mark is right at the place where you want it. And this gets interesting because you're holding your T-square, you're holding your triangle, you're shifting your architect scale, and you're looking at stuff and things move. So there you go. I want to make sure that's correct. And I'm going to come down and make a dot at 0. And again, I'm just not even going to pick up my stylus. I'm just going to come over here, slide my triangle over, and I'm just going to light hand just push up to this line. And then as we learned before, we know that this is our 39 feet. This is 26 feet. You're just going to freehand and connect the dots, connect the ends of the lines and close that. And there's our canted wall for SQ201. So before we go and offset the walls or worry about anything, reinforce our learning, I guess. And I'm going to come over here and do the same thing again. I'm just going to say, I'm going to hold my T-square nice and tight to my drawing surface. I'm going to hold my triangle to my T-square, and I'm going to slide it over. I'm going to slide my 42-foot mark up. I want to look straight down at it and make sure that 42 foot is aligned with this top line that I created. I'm going to make a dot down here at 0. And again, I'm not even going to pick up my stylus. And I'm going to slide my triangle over, and I'm going to just push up. And again, it's light hand. Again, I'm getting a dark line because I'm using a very soft graphite. Again, while you're doing this, you should be using, at the softest, a 2H, but a 3H or a 4H pencil, you're going to get a nice, light, sharp line. That's what you really want to be looking for. You can always draw over the top and make lines darker. That's always an option. So again, I'm going to slide my T-square and my architect scale up. I'm going to set 26 feet at this corner. Come back, set my stylus at 0, and then just bring my T-square up to my stylus. Something doesn't feel right about that. Something shifted. I'm going to do that again. So there's always that. When I pulled my T-square up, it just didn't look like it was aligned properly. So again, I'm going to pull this up. I'm going to come, oh, that's what it is. My T-square is floating and my triangle, or my architect scale was getting underneath my T-square. So I need to press down on this end of my T-square so it's not floating. And come over here and make my dot here. So if I pull this away, look at the difference of where my dots are. So there you go. So now when I bring my T-square up, that makes a lot more sense. And there's my 26-foot wall. I'm going to take my architect scale and measure, set 0 at this northwest corner, come across, find 35 feet, which is this point, which we measured off at our 8 3/4. So all of that information on that handout is good information. But then here we go. What we almost missed the last time around is where is 39 feet down. And again, T-square tight against the table. Hold it down nice and tight here. Hold the triangle to the T-square. Slide your architect scale, get over the top. Make sure that that 39-foot line is right smack there. I'm going to come and set my stylus right at 0. Pull my architect scale away. Make sure I'm holding my T-square firm again. Make sure things don't shift while I'm doing all this moving around. And push up. And then close the opening. So the next step is offset the walls, measure off and mark where the door openings are, erase some stuff away, and we're off and running. Okay, I'm going to switch to my 4H pencil, nice and hard, to do these outer wall perimeters. The outer wall line is not as important as the inner wall line, so a lighter outer line versus the bold inner line creates a hierarchy. So now, before we get going there, I'm going to grab my eraser shield. I'm going to mask off this corner and take away that little overrun. I'm going to come up here and mask this end off. Take that portion off, then slide it over. And I'm going to take that out. So I've opened that up, and I'm going to come and erase this little overrun here. So I kind of like that choice of doing the 1/8 and making that one line. I found that to be rather efficient as a different approach. Okay, so 5-inch walls offset all the way around. We did this on the graph paper, so I'm going to take my 1/4-inch scale. Each one of these tick marks at 1/4-inch scale represents 1 inch. So I'm just going to go around all of these walls and I'm just going to make a little tick mark here. And I only need one because I'm using my T-square and my triangle to do vertical, and I'm using my T-square to do horizontal. So all I need to do is align with these singular tick marks. So I need to stand up and get over my drawing. And notice I'm actually here going to set my architect scale at the 5-inch mark and make a mark at 0. So I don't necessarily need to make a mark over here because my parallel bar is going to cover that. Same thing here. So I'm going to set my architect scale at 5, make a mark at 0, and then on this side do just the opposite. Set it at 0, make a little mark at the 5-inch mark, and then just the opposite here. Or I'm going to flip it upside down, set it at 0. Yeah, Callie, my cat wants to jump up, and there she is. Yeah, this is what it's like when you draw, but you need to go down. And there you go. We have all our marks. Oh, except for our canted wall. There's our 5-inch mark. And remember, on the canted wall, we're making 2 marks so that we have 2 marks to remain parallel from end to end. And I'm going to be so bold as to do the canted wall line first, and again, lighter pencil line, or harder graphite, lighter pencil line, and I'm going to let those overrun. I can always erase them back. They're light lines. I can manage that. So if I let these 2 guys overrun, here's my mark for my 5-inch offset at the south wall here. So now I can just go from this intersection, I'm going to push it out, let it overrun a little bit here. Same thing, intersection, push it out, let it overrun here. Can erase these back. That's not gonna break the world. So now I'm align with this point here, and I'm just going to be so bold as I'm just going to do the same thing I did before, and I'm holding a perpendicular stylus and drawing that across. Now I'll grab my triangle, and I'm going to find all my verticals. Here's my point. And again, the reason for a vertical stylus is if you hold it at an angle and you start drawing against this triangle or your T-square or your parallel bar, your stylus, the point of the stylus, may want to dig underneath that, which then your line's not going to be straight. So here's my point. Start at the top, bring it down to where I intersect. Come over here, here's my point. And again, holding my T-square tight, holding my triangle tight to my T-square. And let's see, so I'm right-handed, so how do I want to do this one? I'm actually going to get up, and so I need to push my T-square, bring my triangle, and there we go. There's my offset wall lines. And grab my eraser shield, and if I'm going to be so concerned, mouse this off, take this one away, a little overrun over here, take out this middle, mask that, okay, and there we go. So now it comes down to using our architect scale and measuring out where our door openings are, our window openings are, and putting in our dimension strings. When creating your dimension strings, you want your dimension strings to be offset at regular intervals throughout the drawing from your geometry. In this case, it is typically good to use increments of 6 inches, whether it be a foot, 18 inches, 24 inches, etc. So for this drawing, at 1/4 inch scale, I think I'm going to set a standard of using 18 inches. And we are going to need along most of these walls incremental increments, so along the north wall where the mullions exist, but also the overall dimension of the width of the room. So I'm going to set my scale at 3 feet, make a mark at 18 inches and a mark at 0. And then I'm going to come up with my T-square. I'm going to set my stylus at the 18-inch mark, making sure that I'm holding my T-square down, and I'm going to make that dimension line, and then I'm going to come up here and I'm also going to make the overall dimension line. And while I'm at it, I could actually do that for both rooms. So I'm going to set my stylus here and come back, and so there's a dimension line spanning the room at 18 inches for the incremental increments and 1 for the overall dimension. There are no incremental increments down the west wall or the south wall. So I'm just going to be bold and use a different, again, sequence. Sequence is not necessarily consistent. You can do things in different orders. So I have incremental increments here, so 18 inches and 3 feet. And then same thing along this wall. So I'm going to set it at 3 feet. I'm going to make a mark at 18 inches and at 0. And so now I'm going to use my triangle. Set my stylus at this first mark. So I have incremental dimensions, and then I have my overall dimension along this wall is the 42 feet. I only have the singular dimension across, but I want to see where my south wall is, and it's going to be roughly all of that. And just to keep track, I'm going to make my little tick marks on these guys, my architectural ticks, and that is standard. Some interior designers like to use arrowheads. Engineers sometimes like to use circles, but more often than not, most everybody's using an architectural tick. And here's my other overall dimension string over here. Bring my triangle to, and I'm going to draw down, and I'm going to use my eyeballs to figure out where it stops here. Now here's the interesting thing, is your extension lines should never touch your geometry. I need my little architectural tick here. I'm going to have another architectural tick here, and another one here. So my extension line does not want to touch this corner. So I'm going to draw from my architectural tick down, but I'm going to stop a distance from my wall line so that there's a gap. So it's saying from this corner extending up, that is the length of this, for example, 26 feet, 0-inch wall. And then my overall dimension over here is going to be 42 feet, 0 inches. And again, this text is consistent with the lettering exercise that we did at the beginning of class. So 35, 0 inches. And then everything wants to read in the same direction. So this one's going to say 39 feet, 0 inches. So there's my overall dimensions. So when it comes to adding in the increments of our 7-inch, 2.5-inch, 2.5, 1, 2.5, that is where patience takes precedence. Coming up our east wall, and let's get to our 1/4-inch scale. Our first dimension string is at 3 3/4 inches. So how do I find, and we have fudge factor, of how close can I put my stylus, where between how close to 4 and how close to 4 am I placing it to the thickness of this graphite line. So this is an example of where you can only be so accurate with what you're drawing with by hand. So I'm going to come up here and bring in my extension line. Does not touch my geometry. My 2-inch dimension does not touch my geometry. But this is where, in the handout, this is why we're putting that 3 3/4 inch dimension text out here, and then we can float our 2-inch dimension above this dimension string. So then we would continue up this wall, our 3 feet, our 2-inch, our 1'11", 2-inch, 3 feet for our window, 2-inch for our door frame, 5 feet 1 to our door, etc., etc. So this is the methodology that you employ for creating all of your dimension strings. And I'm going to line here and not touch my geometry, and there's my extension line, not touching. That is the process for laying in all your dimension strings. We already did on our graph paper our door opening over here, where we were 3 feet 8 from our corner. So I'm going to set 3 feet on my scale and make a mark at 3 feet 8 again, and then another 2 inches. So I'm going to set 0 and try and make a mark at 2 inches. Then our door is 3 feet 6. So again, this all comes down to how sharp is your stylus, how are you applying your stylus to your paper, and are you being consistent with trying to keep your stylus vertical. I'm leaving mine laid down a little bit for clarity for the camera. And coming back to using my triangle, and again, trying to set it to the tick mark, parallel to the wall. So there's where our door opening is. Let's erase out our door opening. And I'm blowing on my paper because I didn't bring out my artist brush. You don't want to be wiping this off with your hand then, because you're going to smudge it, get your hand oils everywhere, etc. I have this mark here. I'm going to use my eyeballs to be as parallel as possible to my wall line. And so now here's my dimension string, and it's only going to come down. My interior only deals with the door opening. It doesn't go all the way to the corner. And I'm going to project. Now here's an interesting use of my straight edge. I'm going to use this corner of my straight edge, say parallel along here, and I can do my extension line this way. And there's my architectural tick, and I ran it over just a tad. So I'm going to erase this guy back. And then it's the same. I'm going to do the same thing here. I'm going to set my stylus here at this corner. I'm going to bring my straight edge here. I'm going to use the square edge of my straight edge. Tick, tick. And then here. And don't touch my line work. And here is my 2-inch, my make a nice 3 feet 6 inch door opening, a 2-inch door frame, and then my 3 feet 8 from the corner. So this is how you're going to do your dimension strings for your floor plans. That is a simple methodology. Extension lines do not touch your line work, like I did there mistakenly. 12-inch, 18-inch, 24-inch, some kind of random, but at least there's regularity in the offset. Your text, proper size, roughly 3/32 to an eighth of an inch tall. And that is how we draw by hand.